Hi, friends. We are so excited for you all to listen to this episode specifically discussing childhood trauma. It's incredibly informative and shares some very personal stories and experiences. We do want to list some content warnings. Content warnings include, but are not limited to, discussions of suicide, suicidal ideations, suicide attempts, rape and sexual assault, and domestic violence. If you or a loved one is in need of support, please call or text 988 24/7 365.
Let's go, girl. Hello again, friends, and welcome back. As you can see, like we do with our expert guests, we're all recording from the comfort of our homes. That allows us to bring you experts from all over the country, even as far away as Utah. So, welcome to the Undomesticated Podcast, Lizzy. We are so grateful that you took the time to join us today to share your expertise with us and our listeners.
Absolutely. I'm so thrilled to be here. Thank you for having me.
So, Lizzy and hi, Lizzy.
Hi.
Thank you for coming. Lizzy and I go way back. We were both in the Miss America organization. She represented Utah, I represented Missouri, and we became close because we both had the same platform, which was advocating for foster care and adoption. She has now taken that into her professional line of work, and we are excited to have you here, and we're going to just dive right in. So let's start by telling us how you became interested in helping people who have experienced trauma in childhood, what that journey looked like for you to be here today.
Oh, absolutely. So, honestly, it started with my own trauma. When I was a teenager, I realized pretty early on that I was a little different than other girls and um, realized pretty young that I'm bisexual, and in my community, that was not allowed, not okay. And so, to protect myself, I started throwing myself at boys, thinking that it'd be better to be seen as boy crazy than to be seen as who I was. And unfortunately, that did not protect me. I ended up getting raped before I even went on my first date. I was very young.
Mm.
And I didn't tell anyone because of the shame I felt. And the shame just kept spiraling the longer I went. And I was really good at putting up like a really strong front in front of everybody. I was the commencement speaker in high school. I was the Sterling Scholar with music, and I was in the performing arts. I was a pageant girl. Like nobody would have guessed
Mm-hmm.
that behind closed doors, I just wanted it all to end. And the truth is that I tried and I
Mm-hmm.
survived my suicide attempt. And the very next morning, my parents, I don't know why they felt that need at that exact moment, but they realized, like, okay, we've talked about becoming a foster family. Now is the time that we need to do so. So I literally came downstairs the morning after to that conversation, and my and that's what saved me. Just 2 months later, my little sister, who we ended up adopting through foster care, came into our lives. And the moment I held her, I felt like I suddenly understood what Dr. Seuss meant by like the Grinch's heart grew by 3 sizes, because that's what happened to me. And I knew instantly that that was somebody that I could live for. She quickly ended up in the hospital. She was born addicted to illegal substances, and I remember just being so angry at God. I
Mm-hmm.
I was at the hospital with her, and I got back into the car, and I was just screaming at the top of my lungs. I had never even sworn before at this point, but every four-letter word was just coming out. And I just couldn't understand why bad things happen to good people, why we can't, like, why aren't you doing something, God? And at that moment, I turned on the radio station, and it just happened to be on K-Love, and a song by Matthew West came on that I hadn't heard before called Do Something. And the lyrics that came out in that moment were, I shook my fist at heaven and said, God, why don't you do something? He said, I did. I created you. And in that moment, I was like, yeah, you've got the wrong girl.
Yeah.
I'm 18. Nobody knows what I'm going through. I don't have like an education yet. I'm in my first year of getting a bachelor's in violin performance. What am I supposed to do?
Mm-hmm.
But if I'd ever felt called to anything, this was it. So that same week, I ended up going to Utah foster care, and I'm like, hey, here I am. What can I do to help? And that kept moving forward. I ended up becoming a court appointed special advocate for children in foster care. I ended up working in foster care. I ended up taking even my music teaching to a different direction, really specializing in individuals that were struggling, the kids that other teachers were saying, no, I can't deal with this kid, I don't know how to help them. And then I pivoted to the education system, and now I'm here as a counselor, still trying to help other people find their own
Yeah.
strength, because I don't think that we should just be surviving. I think that we should be able to thrive, and that's my goal as a counselor, is to help other people do that.
Absolutely.
So it's interesting to me to hear your story, Lizzy, and to see how things kind of all came together for you to be a person that you needed and that people needed in your past. And the Undomesticated podcast is all about doing that and making people feel seen and heard and acknowledging that we face these challenges and sometimes you may not be made to feel welcome, and women especially have not always had that place where they can find resources and get what they need to be able to thrive, not just survive. And so it aligns really well with what we created this podcast to do. So we are really excited. We also think we talked to our guest last week about trauma, just kind of in general, and some of the misconceptions that are there. I would like to get into this idea of childhood trauma specifically, because I do think there are a lot of misconceptions there. There are a lot of people who downplay the experiences of children, especially, and tend to think they're over sensationalizing, or they're not remembering clearly, or that wasn't really your experience. And so getting into what is childhood trauma, understanding that's going to have to be a broad definition,
Yeah.
right? Because it may look different. But what is childhood trauma, and how do you identify that it was childhood trauma and not misremembrances or things like that?
Well, I would define childhood trauma as some kind of event or circumstance that causes the child abnormal amounts of harm to their physical and emotional safety. So things like abuse, neglect, loss. And I think that something to point out is whether or not you feel like that child's remembrance of something is accurate, to them, it doesn't make it any less real. Their experience and the way that their brain is reacting to that experience is just as valid if it ended up actually just being a nightmare that they had. If it is causing them harm, then we need to take it seriously, regardless of our perception of it. And I really like how you said that they're often viewed as being sensationalized, or like that's not really how it went. I'd like to also add that a lot of people start saying things like, oh, well, kids are so resilient. Okay, but do you expect them to be resilient without the resources and connection and love and guidance that they need in order to become resilient? Or are you just using that as an excuse to not give them what they deserve?
Right.
I think you bring up a really good point with the impact adults have when those situations are happening, and the difference it can make for an adult to intervene now versus waiting until adulthood, and then that adult who experienced the trauma trying to go back and recover from what they experienced. So in that situation, what is the impact of an adult who responds well to a child saying, this is what's happening, this is what I'm feeling, this is
Mm.
what I'm worried about, versus the, oh, you're being dramatic, it's not that bad, suck it up, pick yourself up by your bootstraps kind of response.
Or even the gaslighting
Yeah.
Yes.
from someone in your family. Oh, it didn't happen that way. Oh my gosh, I know him. He
Mhm.
would never do that.
Yeah. I think that just provides shame into the equation rather than releasing that shame. Because if we are not validating the experiences of others, whether they're a child or not, you kind of put a wall in between you both. So
Mm-hmm.
if something worse happens down the line, guess who they're not going to come to anymore? So that's kind of why I brought up the fact that to them, whatever they're perceiving as trauma, we should take with honor. Because if a kid is struggling about having bad grades, for example, or being bullied at school, and we don't react well, or we diminish their concerns as if they're nothing, if something really serious happens, if that bullying escalates, or if somebody assaults them, or if
Mm-hmm.
there's something really dark happening in their lives, or they're even debating on whether to take their life, they're not going to come to you. So the moment that you gaslight, the moment that you devalue what somebody is telling you, you are putting up a wall between you and your child or any loved one. So just beware that that means that you are not going to be able to help them in the future.
I think that's really good for people to hear because it is an important consideration because even, myself and my son hasn't brought anything like that to me, but it's easy as an adult. We're busy, we've got a lot going
Mm-hmm.
on. It's easy when your kid comes to you and expresses some sort of emotion about, their toy broke and he's upset about it. It's easy to go, it's not that big of a deal.
Yeah.
Just just move on, go play with something else. I'm busy
Right.
right now. And just doing that, build a wall, maybe not, but if that's consistently what they get when they're coming to you as the adult they trust for help navigating this emotion in this situation, especially in extreme
Right.
situations like
Yes.
abuse or neglect, really damaging. So, message for our mamas who are listening, just be attentive. None of us are perfect, but be
Yeah.
attentive, validate those little feelings, and dig deeper if you need
Yeah.
to.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, Lizzie, what are common mental health diagnoses for children that have experienced trauma?
Well, it really depends on the circumstance, but some of the things that we see a lot of would be like PTSD, anxiety is a
Mm-hmm.
huge one, huge, and
Yeah.
same with depression. Past that, there's also a lot of other things that can come up, but I would like to point out that a lot of these diagnoses have comorbidities, meaning that it's almost as if all of these diagnoses or different circumstances for the brain are sisters. You can easily mistake them for each other. They look similar. Bipolar disorder can look very similar to depression, can make look very similar to anxiety, can look very similar to RAD, etc. So in foster care, we see all the time kids being misdiagnosed with things when really what is going on is trauma. So that's another reason why trauma is so important to address, is because if we
Yeah.
don't, then it leads to other things happening and it leads to the child and eventually adult not being able to thrive.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Such a good point. Just a personal like experience question. When I worked in residential homes for children in foster care, I would say we had 10 kids. 8 of the 10 kids had a diagnosis of RAD, reactive attachment disorder.
Mhm.
Can you go into kind of what that looks like in a child or what exactly RAD is?
It's that reactive disorder of just not being able to attach to people. And I think it comes from a place of fear. If the person, like a
Mhm.
caregiver or a parent specifically, the person that's supposed to take care of them and is supposed to protect them ends up being the very person that harms them, that's going to make it very hard for them to trust anybody else. And so that
Mhm.
trauma is going to make it look like they have rad when they might just be scared to attach. So I think that a lot of kiddos get diagnosed with rad way too early because they
Mhm.
might just need more time than the typical kid to connect and to really feel safe.
Right. Yeah, agreed. I just thought how interesting and odd that there are so many rad
Mhm.
diagnoses and nobody's really getting to the root of
Mhm.
what's causing the rad diagnosis.
Yes.
So I was interested to hear your take on that.
And you have a long history of working with children in foster care, which I love. And so, what would you say specifically about children in foster care who may have experienced trauma for people who are listening who may be considering adoption out of foster care or may be considering fostering? What should those people understand and be prepared to provide to those children to be able to really embrace that child in the right way and
Yeah.
understand the trauma and the impact it's having on that child as they move into this new environment?
Absolutely. First of all, if you are going through a reputable agency, they should be training you on a lot of this. But beyond that, I would highly, 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 highly recommend if you are thinking about adopting or fostering that you go to therapy because the
Mm.
trauma that your kiddos or the kiddos in your home are going through, in order for you to truly be present and truly be able to help them, you need to take care of your own shit first.
I love
Yeah.
a therapy
And
recommendation.
Yeah.
and that, like, you don't want to end up getting triggered by your kiddo and not being able to help them. Or another point is a lot of people become more open to the idea of fostering and adoption because of their own infertility issues. That's beautiful.
Mhm.
Mhm.
However, it is not a fix for the loss that they have experienced. And so if you don't go to therapy and take care of your own issues first, how are you going to react when a kiddo is removed from your home and reunited with their parents? Is that going to
Mm.
make the loss that
Right.
you've gone through worse? Or are you not going to be able to honor the loss of that connection to their bio parents, whether or not you adopt? Would
Mhm.
really recommend going to therapy yourself, not just to take care of your own trauma, but also to figure out exactly what your coping mechanisms are. Because maybe you haven't had an experience that's been super traumatic yet, but if you're opening your home and your hearts to foster care, you're about to have some.
Mhm.
Yes. Oh, I love that.
Wow.
Those were some really good chunks of wisdom
Thank you.
Yeah.
in there across the board, really, because I don't think we think often enough about how our own issues that we may not have addressed impact the way we raise our kids and the way they are
Mhm.
responding to us and how important that is.
Yeah. And you know what? I even realize as we talk through this, I'm realizing like my own biases by even having that question written down. I'm more asking what bad things about the kids should we know for the parent to be prepared for? And when you answered, the parent needs to go to therapy, I'm like, you're exactly right because it's not it's when they are heads that are clashing 100% behavior of the child is going to affect the behavior of the parent, and the way that they work and the way that they begin to work through issues is when both of them are working for a better relationship.
Mhm.
Oh,
I'm so
So
glad you said it because I'm totally there
yeah.
and was
yeah,
like, oh man, like you are the adult in that relationship. So
exactly.
Yes.
God, and it's like I literally am an advocate for them. I work with them and I still had that just inherent bias to put that in, and that's why this episode is so important because we're just going to continually knock down those biases.
And sometimes it's hard to remember that they are outside of this very real trauma, which is being in foster care or being removed from your bio family or family of origin. They're just kids. And even
Right.
Have bio kids. They could go through traumatic experiences too. So regardless of
Right.
whether you're a bio parent, a foster parent, an adoptive parent, maybe a kinship caregiver,
Mhm.
you need to be prepared for these kind of behaviors to come up. No one signs up to be a parent or a caregiver of a disabled child or a child that ends up being assaulted or a child that's
Right.
getting bullied or has a speech impediment. Nobody signs up for that. So it's our job to be prepared.
So, a lot of children dealing with trauma are often looked at as the troublemaker, or, the kid that didn't bring their homework back. So now the whole class doesn't get a piece of candy. Um, what would you say to educators about trauma behavior in children, and how they can be aware, how they can protect that child, and how they can report any type of situation that child might seem like they're in harm?
Yeah. So, first of all, I would recommend any educator going and doing some kind of trauma course. Um, as somebody who works in the elementary education system, just as an after school orchestra teacher, even had to take a mandated course, but it wasn't very current, just to be
Yeah.
frank. It didn't give very many actionable tips or views of what it actually looks like to witness abuse or neglect, or that a kid might need more resources even outside of trauma. So I highly recommend going and getting some kind of training within trauma. And this can count towards your continued education, which is super nice. And that's required anyways.
Right.
So you might as well take that opportunity. I'd also like to say, to add on, that another label that's often put on these kids is attention seeking. What's wrong with
Mm.
that?
Right.
A kiddo who's
Yeah.
having a hard time wants attention, wants love,
Mhm.
wants connection.
Mm.
So, if
Right.
they're attention seeking, give them attention. And oftentimes,
Mhm.
when they're getting what they need, even if it's just you putting just like the tips of your finger on their shoulder to let them know that you understand that they're there, you see them. Oftentimes, these behavioral issues will decrease, they'll lessen because they're getting what
Mhm.
they need.
Hmm. No press is bad press. No attention is bad attention to a child that
Yes,
isn't getting that need met.
yes, that is
Yeah,
so
Kayla.
true. Yes, I love that. I love that.
Yes.
Dang it. Kayla got the first yes from the therapist. Lizzy, obviously, as a parent, we notice things in our children depending on the amount of involved you are with your child. We can notice if there's extreme distress in a child. However, we have educators, we have babysitters, we have um, music teachers. We have all of these different people who are also watching children that might not be a parent themselves and might not specifically know what to look for when they see a child that has possibly experienced trauma. What are some signs that you are interacting with a child who has gone through trauma, and what steps do they need to take as far as helping this child?
um, a phrase that we say a lot in the foster care system: failure to thrive. And that's going to look different for every kiddo. One example would be if a kid that's usually a straight A student is top of their class, suddenly is not bringing homework, suddenly is having a hard time understanding concepts. It might just be a new
Mm-hmm.
unit, but it might be something that you need to look into more, especially with the way that trauma affects the brain. One of the first things that goes is cognition, which unfortunately also means like communication skills and relationship skills. And so if a kiddo's suddenly having behavioral issues that they haven't had in the past, fighting with other kiddos more, or especially like siblings or friends, if they're having a hard time understanding and following directions, then that's a warning
Mm-hmm.
sign that something might be going on.
So if an adult is noticing some of those patterns, what are the right steps? And again, it's going to vary by, are you the parent and you can intervene directly versus a teacher? But generally speaking, what are some next steps to, one, identify, is there something here that we need to dig into further? And then what do we do to get them help if it is something that's going on that needs to be addressed?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think that the first step is actually stuff that you do before anything happens, before you notice any trauma.
Okay.
And I call it the consistency of character. Just to give an example, when I was going through this traumatic experience as a teenager, I was terrified to tell my parents because shame is awful. It's that little snake that crawls up your back and whispers into your ear, "Oh, I know you're 99% sure that your parents have your back no matter what. But what about that 1%? Maybe you should hold
Right.
off on telling them what happened. Oh, it's been a year, Lizzy. You're going to get in trouble if you tell them. Oh, it's too late now. It's too late now. That shame is awful. And so, something that I noticed when my parents became foster parents is I had this unique opportunity to see what my parents would do in those circumstances when people were telling them about it, traumatic experiences, both from the viewpoint of the children as well as the adults. The bio parents, they were kind and loving and accepting too. And these were adults that sometimes did things themselves rather than just being victims of traumatic experiences themselves. And I saw them reach out and give resources and be understanding. I heard them say phrases like, "It wasn't your fault. You are more than what happened to you. What can we do next?" And I suddenly had data because I knew how they responded, not just to me because I'm their daughter, but just how they responded because of who they were as human beings. And that made it so
Right.
easier for me to finally tell them what had happened to me. And they instantly became my number one supports. So I think that the first thing is, if you are concerned about the children and the people around you in general, practice that consistency of character because they might be waiting to see how you respond to a same sex kiss on TV before coming out to you. They might wait to see how you react to one of those news stories about a woman that was assaulted behind a dumpster. They might be waiting to get some kind of data to know whether or not you're a safe person for them to come to. And by practicing that consistency of character, like my parents did, you can do something which is the hardest thing to do, in my opinion, as a therapist, and that is combat shame.
Hi, guys. Just a little pause for me to let you know that my commentary will not be in the end of this episode. My audio and video cut out completely. What Kayla and Lizzy continue on for the rest of this episode is hands down one of the most important conversations. So please keep listening and know that I'm listening too.
We've covered what it looks like in children. What does it look like in adulthood when it doesn't get addressed right away?
Yeah, I think it's like a continuation of that failure to thrive, but it looks different in adults. It might look like not being able to hold down friendships or relationships that are romantic or relationships with family. It might look like not being able to hold down a job, or instead of behavioral issues, it might look like not being able to follow the law, which is probably one of the reasons why a lot of children in foster care who age out of the system without permanency, whether that be adoption or reunification, they're at a much higher statistic chance of ending up in jail, getting up pregnant within the first year, or ending up dead within like the first 2 years. And it's an awful statistic. I hate that, but it's the truth. And that's one of the reasons why focusing on childhood trauma is so important, because children are innocent, but they also have less choice and less control. When you give somebody that kind of trauma and then you give them control over themselves, they might not be able to make the decisions that are going to enable them to have happy and healthy lives like what they deserve. And that's not fair to them if it's because they didn't receive the resources that they deserve to have when they were children.
I think back even to people our age whose parents were Gen X or baby boomers, that was I wasn't traumatized, or I didn't get to call it trauma, so you don't either kind of thing. So taking a step back and recognizing that, okay, maybe I do have some things I need to go work through. And there are obvious issues, to use your examples, Lizzy. I really have trouble holding down a job, or gosh, I just can't find the right guy. I have gone from boyfriend to boyfriend to boyfriend, and I just cannot make it work. I'm sick of doing that. I'm sick of being the hamster in the wheel. What does therapy and recovery look like when someone recognizes I have an issue, I need to get help with this because I can't deal with it on my own? What does that process look like?
It's really going to look different for everyone. So I'm going to give some vague answers. First of all, we're going to start looking at basic needs, making sure that those basic needs are met. And the basic needs that I look for the most as a therapist are going to be rest, hydration, and nutrition. If those things are not being met appropriately, then it is going to hurt your ability to make good decisions and to feel good. In fact, a trick that we used to use when I worked in foster care is when we were about to have really hard conversations with kiddos, if we gave them a glass of water or a glass of juice or something hydrating right before we had that conversation, we saw a drastic decrease in behavioral outbursts. So, and making sure that your protein is being met, especially making sure you're getting your fruits and veggies. This isn't a diet thing or anything. This is are you getting enough? So that's going to be the first thing I'm looking at is rest, hydration, and nutrition. Another thing we're going to look at is, really diving into some potentially traumatic experiences in your life and making sure that they have really processed it. And depending on the situation, that might mean doing like rapid eye movement therapy, like ART or EMDR. It might just be talk therapy. And it might actually result in other kinds of therapies as well that are supposed to help you learn how to do boundaries and how to assert yourself, how to be confident, how to have a healthy relationship with oneself. All these things that hopefully you learn in childhood and adolescence, but if you don't, come to therapy and we'll work through it together. There are different resources that you can go to. For example, a lot of churches, the bishops or the clergy members, there's actually something called clergy pay that a lot of therapists will take. So if you go to a church, they might be able to help you with that. Through the school systems, most universities have counseling programs where the student counselors, while they're in internship, will give free services to other students. And that's how they become the fully licensed therapists. And then also there are some government sanctions as well. If you're using insurance for therapy, et cetera, you probably want to make sure that they specialize in what you're looking to have fixed. Like you wouldn't want to go to a neurologist for heart problems, right? So if you're going for trauma, I would highly recommend, like, if you're going on Psychology Today, which is a great resource that is free, you can look up psychologists in your area, counselors in your area, and you can see their contact info, whether or not they take insurance. Look at what kind of therapies they specialize in. So, for example, if you're struggling with OCD tendencies, something like cognitive behavioral therapy might be helpful. If you are struggling with trauma, something like EMDR might be helpful. So, looking at what kind of therapies they practice, as well as watching the videos if they have a video up, which I'm calling out myself. I need to put a video up, but that way you can you can get a feeling for what they're like, because I think the most powerful thing in therapy is that human connection.
There are differences between men and women.
Yeah. So let's start off with the statistics. Women are much more likely to get on antidepressants. Women are much more likely to go to therapy, but men are more likely to complete suicide. And I think that that is an important thing to highlight as a feminist. I believe that men and women should be treated as equals. and should be given the same opportunity so that they can go forward with whatever skills and passions that they have. Usually that falls on making sure that women are being treated equally, but when it comes to mental health, I think that that's one of the areas where we don't treat little boys especially equally. We need to put a rest to things like be a man, boys don't cry, don't express yourself. I mean, when we put these kind of thoughts into young boys and it suddenly becomes like, oh, I can't fully express myself unless it is sports, sex, or violence, that's going to end up with the higher statistics of domestic violence as well as male suicide. And so we really need to stop these trends where men aren't able to talk about their feelings and make sure that as women, we validate them and we love them when they do with these feelings. Because a lot of the men that I've talked to, both within therapy as well as when I was doing foster parent recruiting, a lot of the men reported that they didn't feel comfortable showing emotions because it was women in their lives that were telling them to be a man. So we all just need to be better at loving each other. That's what feminism is about.
I love that. I would not have thought it was women, but now that you say that, I could see where your expectation is to be the provider and the protector, and maybe your wife, the couple of times you've tried to be vulnerable, is like, oh, I don't have time for that. For me, it's that Matt would tell you, I am a hopeless optimist. And so anything he brings up as a concern, I'm like, it'll be fine. We're all going to hold hands and sing kumbaya, and everything's just going to turn out rainbows and butterflies. So let's move on. But I can see where, if I take a step back to put myself in his shoes, where that comes across as your issues aren't important and it's going to be fine and you're worrying about nothing. So don't come to me with your issues. Now that I think about it, I can see where that's not necessarily the way it would come across when you're looking for someone to be like, that sucks. And I'm sorry that's what you're going through. And if you want to talk about it, let's talk about it. So, last question of the day, Lizzy, and it's a super broad question. So, no answer is off limits. But what do you wish more people knew or understood about childhood trauma?
How to respond. How to respond with love and compassion and help. Funnily enough, I'm actually in the process of, I'm just finishing up a training that I'm putting together for teachers, parents, clergy members, anybody that wants to help bring down the suicide rate and know how to respond when somebody comes to them with a traumatic disclosure, whether it's I'm suicidal or I want to come out to you. I'm teaching them how to react. And this course is going to go over how to react with your body language, with your vocal inflections, what to say and what not to say, as well as self-regulation so that you're taking care of yourself and not panicking during this really hard conversation. So that's something that I really wish that more people knew, which is why I'm putting this free course together, just to go over why it's so important to know what to say and what not to say. I'd love to give an example if that's okay with you guys.
Yes, please.
So the first person that ever found out that I had been assaulted, I didn't tell him. He kind of forced it out of me and figured it out by seeing my expressions afterwards. I then, like a week later, his stepmom cornered me and offered to pay for therapy. And so in my mind, I'm like, I didn't even want you guys to know. And you forced it out of me. It made me feel unsafe. And now you're telling other people. It shut me down. It shut me down. This is the guy I was dating at the time. And that was the beginning of the end.
Oh,
100%.
no.
And I think that he came from a place of concern and care. I don't think he had malicious intent. He's not the bad guy of this story, but he didn't respond well. And it turned me off to therapy for years. I really needed. Compare that to a few years later, I'm on like a really casual date with a guy in the orchestra at college. He's in the orchestra. I'm in the orchestra. We're both music majors. And I don't know what it is, but while we were at dinner, it just came out. It slipped out of my mouth. And in my mind, I'm going, oh, all 4-letter words. I'm like, there's all my colleagues and my professors. This is someone I have to see every day. Like, no, 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 no. This cannot be happening. What have I done? And he just reaches across the table, puts his hand next to mine, doesn't even touch me, and looks me in the eye and says, "Thank you so much for telling me. All I want is to know you
Wow.
better. And I hope you know that I don't see you any differently. You're still the same old Lizzy that I think is really pretty and kind of scary. I do want to clarify, like, are you okay? Like, is this person still in your life?" I'm like, no, 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 it wasn't anyone in my family. It's not somebody that's in my life anymore. I'm safe. He's like, oh, okay, good. You know, it's making me realize why you hate it so much when our friends sneak up behind you and like jumpstart you. I'm going to go tell them to make sure that to not do that to you or anybody else because I'm realizing how harmful that can be. Is there anything else I can do to make sure that you feel safe around me? And I was
Wow.
like, what in the world?
What just happened?
Like all of the like for the first time since I had been assaulted, for the first time since I'd realized I was bisexual, for the first time since I had skipped the first meal hoping to be skinny enough to be loved, I was like, oh, I'm worthy of care.
Mhm.
Like that was the first time that had even crossed my mind. And so that's my hope is that other people will be able to react like that. So to give you like a little acronym to help you remember how to react like the boy I went on that date with, I want you to remember thick. T, thank you for telling me. Reward them for telling you something that was really hard or potentially really scary. H, how can I help? Oh, you just came to me letting me know that you were assaulted. Do we need to go to the hospital? Do you want me to go with you? So how can I help? I still see you. So many people that go through trauma get scared that it's going to define them, that it's going to become everything. And in some ways, it does. So to hear that you are still more than your trauma is so crucial in helping eliminate shame and helping you not identify with your trauma. C, clarification. Biggest thing, are you safe? Making sure that they are in a position where if you need clarification, like make sure that you get it. And then K, keep the door open. That dude followed through. He made sure that me and all of our female friends, we weren't getting scared in the halls anymore. We weren't getting jump started. And he continued to have conversations with me like, hey, I just wanted to check in, see how you were doing. I also wanted to check in and see like if you've thought about maybe going to therapy. Like I want you to know there's nothing wrong with you, but like I think you're worthy and I think you're wonderful and I think you're worthy of having a happy and healthy life and I don't think that you're living that right now and that worries me. Like that's how he approached it rather than telling a stepmom.
Right.
Uh, and that's what got me into therapy was him. So that
Mhm.
reaction, that difference is huge. It also really helped our relationship. We're still really close. We've been married for almost 6 years now. So it's still very close.
Oh,
Yes, yes.
I love that. Because I was totally about to ask, and you didn't marry this guy?
Oh, I married this guy.
That is amazing.
Yeah, he is the best. And ironically enough, at this point, he had received zero training on trauma or anything regards to that. That's just like came from like an honest place in his heart. That's just who he is. Um, Unfortunately for him, he's gone through so much like mental health and trauma training now because of who he married. I'll come yeah, I'll come home from conferences. I'm like, Jim, you're about to find out so much about childhood trauma. He's like, but rather than being annoyed or something, he's like, oh, lay it on me. I want to be a better dad. Or I want to be a better husband. I
Oh,
want to be a better son. I want to be a better friend. Like he's just, he's a dream. So
yeah,
I know he's
right.
wonderful. Girls that are single out there, stop settling for literal children in men's bodies. Hold them accountable so that they can become the best versions of themselves because there are people like Jim Andrus out there who are caring and loving and have cute butts, and you just need to find them. He's gonna hate that I added
Yes,
that in there, but don't take it out.
I love it. We will leave that in there. That is an important piece of this episode. So I love the acronym. We will be sure to include that in our show notes so everybody can have a nice little reminder when they're thinking about how to respond to those situations appropriately. And we'll also include some links and information about how to find Lizzy and keep track of all the exciting things she has going on. So, Lizzy, truly, we are so very grateful for you joining us. We had so much fun talking with you. You shared some fabulous information that we know our listeners are really taking away some valuable pieces of wisdom today. So, thank you so much for being with us.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Lizzy. We'll see you soon.
See you soon.
I am reeling from all of the information she just shared.
So much
It
information.
was super helpful
Mm-hmm.
and super important.
Yeah.
But I always look forward to a good, lighthearted conversation after we've been in such a heavy place
Yeah.
for a while. So,
Absolutely.
Kelsey, can you tell me what time it is?
Mm-hmm. It's wine and wine, baby. Play that jingle. We're back in action, back with a wonderful wine and wine with you, obviously without the wine, because to our surprise, we're still doing the 75.
We're still going.
We're on day 8 today. And so the wine we've chosen today is pure filtered water, a little H2O. And
All I can think is you're gonna have to leave this in because it's too good. Have you ever seen Waterboy
no,
with Adam Sandler?
no.
Okay, well that's your homework. You have to go watch that movie. He's always like, "That's some high quality H2O."
Essentially, that's what I said.
I know, but as soon as you said it, I couldn't.
Yeah. Well, Kayla, while we're talking about what we're sick of, why don't you tell me, what are you sick of this week besides your water?
So this week, the one of about 100 things I could just rattle off with very little thought is the cars, and you know the ones I'm talking about,
I do.
that they have added some kind of upgraded exhaust that
Mm-hmm.
they think sounds really cool. But they go buzzing by you in traffic and it sounds like as they go by. So
It's so
I am
true.
not talking about the muscle car rumble.
No,
My
no.
father-in-law has I think it's a 62 Chevelle SS, and that thing rumbles, like it growls when you
Yeah.
start it.
Yeah.
That is a good sounding
Right.
car.
It's well earned.
It's a muscle
It's
car.
earned its growl.
Yes. And why is it always a Honda Civic?
I don't know.
Why is it always like a 2003 Honda Civic?
It's
But
so
it
true.
is.
And I know that this is, when this gets posted on socials, it's totally going to hit the wrong target market, and we're going to get like inundated.
We're going to get blasted.
with 29-year-old single men who like collect Honda Civics for some reason. Listen, we're not hating on your passion here. We just are in a sense of not understanding. And also, we would just enjoy like a quiet meal or a quiet stop at the traffic light without our eardrums
Right.
being blasted out by your horrible sounding thing on the back of your car. I don't even know what that is.
Yeah, I totally agree. We probably are going to hit the wrong crowd. Like this is going to we're going to get
Yeah.
500 mansplanations for why that's actually super cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Whatever. And then let me add on to yours. If you have smoke that comes out of your stupid exhaust that like is colored or like
Right. Or the
random,
LED lights underneath.
yeah, go to jail. Straight to jail.
Straight to jail. Do not
Straight
pass
to jail.
go.
Do
Do
not
not
pass
collect
go.
$200.
Like
You're done.
you're done. And if you're not single, I would like to do a case study, and
Right.
I would like to know and speak to the woman you're dating about what exactly it is
Yeah, but
that,
also to make sure she's okay and not being held hostage because
right,
I'm not convinced.
it is
So,
questionable.
so I'm just over it.
Mhm.
I have zero tolerance left for it. I have never been around anyone that when a car like that drives by goes, "Oh man, that car was super cool."
Right.
So, send your hate mail somewhere else because we're not going to respond. But
Yeah. I mean, we're going
right,
to.
yeah, I guess you can't get fired because your
Who's going
kids
to
don't
fire
have
me?
to.
My husband? Oh, great.
Right.
He's going to have to do the laundry.
Right. Oh darn, I got fired. Yeah, I do. But on a serious note, I do need to keep my job. How about you, Kelsey? What is it this week? And I know that with the fact that we're going pee every 5 minutes and we've had to stick to a diet for 8 days, probably makes the list just like exponentially longer. But what's at the top of it? What's at the tippy top of that list this
So
week?
I don't really know why this is at the top of my brain today, but I hate car seats. And
Oh, preach.
before we get jumped in on, I don't hate children in car seats. I want children in a car
Yeah.
seat.
Her children are safely secured in their car seats. I can provide eyewitness testimony.
Literally. Rear facing up to 4.
Right.
Goodbye. Like
They are
I am
buckled
all
in.
about,
They're safe.
yeah, I'm all about car seat safety. I hate the actual structure of a car seat.
Yes.
Why is it that if my child has one Cheeto, like I hand her one Cheeto, and suddenly when she gets up, it looks like she's eaten an entire bag because the crevices of the car seat,
Yes.
it's like it chops it up, spits it out, smushes it along the sides,
Uh-huh.
and then,
Evenly distributed everywhere.
yes, and then you look at it and you go, gosh, that's dirty. Let's put it in the washer. Oh no.
Not
Because
without your crochet hook.
right. You have to pull it apart, separate it in pieces, wash it, but wash it on a certain temperature. And be careful about drying it because it could shrink. And then you get the pleasure after washing it of putting it back on with the 15 steps it took you to take it back off. So,
And trying to remember which of those godforsaken, teeny tiniest loops ever known to man
yes.
went on which hooks on the back that, by the way, are just too far
Yeah.
for you to really be able to stretch that little elastic loop.
You're pulling it. You're pulling it and hoping to God it doesn't break,
Yes.
but also kind of hoping it does break so you can go buy the cheap piece of shit one that doesn't have those complicated hookies.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway.
So you'll appreciate this because you know my mom and you also know Haley. And
Yeah.
at some point, I don't remember if Haley had like a blowout or she vomited on herself in the
All right.
car when she was a little bitty in a car seat. Mom threw out the whole car seat. She was like, she was like, start over. It can't be saved.
Okay, I do that more times than I'm willing to admit. Not with car seats because Michael would like kill me, but if there's like a bottle that I found under a bed, goodbye.
Yeah, gone. Just
Gone
gone.
forever.
Straight to jail. Yeah.
Yep.
But to your point, every time I have to unhook all the little elastic straps on Levi's car seat, I really just want to throw the whole thing out and start over. Like, can't we
Truly.
just buy a new one
Yep.
every time it's time to clean it?
Maybe that's the whole thing. Maybe car seats make it so hard because you'll throw it away and you'll buy a new one.
That, I think you're onto something.
A car seat conspiracy, if you will. We're coming for you, Maxi Cozy.
Although they make them so freaking expensive.
I know.
Most people couldn't afford to do that.
You're
So
so right.
they are their own obstacle if that's the case. Because if they
Yeah.
were like 50 or $60, every time it's time to
Oh
order
my
it,
God,
I
I
would
have
put it.
15.
That would be worth it. That would be worth the time it takes
Totally.
to unhook it and wash it.
100%. And I'm not saying that we wash it frequently. We don't.
No, we don't either.
We're freaking disgusting over here. And
No,
we are
same.
because I cannot emotionally and mentally prepare for washing that frequently.
Oh yeah.
Can't
Here's
do
when
it.
mine gets washed. Oh crap, we're going on a trip with somebody or so and so's gonna be riding. I should probably wash that because it looks like we live in filth.
I know. Oh no, I'm gonna have to put this car seat in somebody else's car so they can pick them up. I need to
100%.
wash it so they
Yeah.
can think I'm way more put together than we are.
Right. All about
Oh,
appearances.
man. Well, I know. I feel so much better. I feel a little bit lighter because I was feeling pretty heavy after that episode.
Yes.
Not because Lizzie's not just a bright, shining light, because she
really
She's
is.
amazing, but because she delivered the hard facts that we needed to hear.
She really did.
And in order to grow and learn from.
Yes. To make a difference, more people have to know those hard facts that are hard to hear, and more people have to be willing to learn how to respond, how to adapt, what to look for. And I love that she was like, listen, go to therapy.
Right.
Because how many times have we said it? But I do feel much better. I'm glad we took a little step back and an opportunity to just kind of lighten the mood and end things on a high note with some laughter before we go back and join our families for the rest of the evening. We hope you all feel a little lighter too, but still well informed. We are so thankful to have all of you here with us every week, and we cannot wait to see you back next Wednesday at 5 a.m. Central.
Yes, please give us a share, a like, a download. Send us to your friends. We love knowing that you guys like hearing us, and we love hearing from you guys too. We love the comments we receive. So keep them up and stay tuned on our social media pages for a big, fun giveaway coming soon that we're so excited about. We will see you guys next week, and thanks for listening. Bye guys.
As a reminder, all opinions and views shared on the show are solely those of Kelsey and Kayla and do not represent opinions or values of the organizations we work for or represent, our filming locations, our guests, or the family and friends in our lives. Artwork for the Undomesticated podcast was created by Megan Justice. The Undomesticated theme music is Beach Day in Boston by Sarah the Instrumentalist, and the theme for Wine and Wine is Follow Every Move by Radio Night. The Undomesticated podcast is produced, edited, and published by Undomesticated LLC. For more information about the podcast and your hosts, visit www.undomesticatedpod.com.